As the name implies, Ergo Proxy revolves around proxies. May it be Vincent who is one, Riel who is infatuated with one, Daedalus who's researching them, or Ralph Creed who's hunting them. It's all about proxies. And yet, what are they? We never get a truly satisfying answer. We get plenty of hints, and sometimes we even get direct statements. But these statements provide more questions than answers. Here's one such statement by Proxy 1.
Tell me, what are we? What are the proxies?
What are the proxies? The answer is in the word itself. We are the agents of the Creator.
The Creator.
All this answer does is shift the question. Now you have to ask, what are the agents of the Creator? The bottom line is that you don't get a final reveal. Proxies aren't explained. You don't get to experience Apollyon delights. The beginning of proxies starts with the end of the old world. Long time ago, it's not really stated how long, human race became energy dependent on a new source of energy, methane hydrate, which actually exists in the real world and is essentially natural gas packed within crystal structure of water. But we have no practical means to extract it, and even if we did, it would be just natural gas, which we already have. Anyways, an accident happened where vast amounts of methane hydrate exploded in a chain reaction, leading to uninhabitable planet with polluted air, covered sun, frozen oceans, and 85% of human population died. As a solution, humans made two plans. First of all, they made a spaceship, on which they escaped the Earth. The second, they made the Proxy project, which was aimed at restoring human race on Earth. Humans enacted both plans, the interesting of which was the Proxy project. They created 300 proxies, which were supposed to create cities separated from the non-inhabitable external world. The point of cities was to wait until the external world had become habitable again and eventually restore the human population on Earth. Once that was done, one way or another, proxies had to die. In the anime itself, proxies behave as two different entities, depending on whether we're observing them in external reality or in somebody's mind. The role of proxies in the external world is quite clearly explained. Make cities, restore human population, and then when the sun comes out, die. Proxy 1 obviously didn't quite like this plan, so he introduced a plot twist, which was to destroy everything. We know quite a lot about their abilities. They're very strong, very fast, they're almost immortal, only sunlight and other proxies can kill them. Some proxies have unique abilities. Somehow proxies know how to build Womsys, which is an artificial birthing machine, and is at the center of cities. Proxies also know how to create AGI robots called autoraves. It's not revealed how they make all of it and why they're paramount to the continued existence of cities, but other than that, we know quite a lot about proxies in the external world. What's on the other hand more mysterious is the exploration of proxies in the imagination of mostly Vincent. To see what I'm talking about, we can take a look at episode 11, in which Vincent was struggling to accept Ergo Proxy as part of himself.
I am nobody, even if I was somebody. I am beyond your comprehension. And even if you could, you would not have the tools to express that knowledge.
Chief.
That is the way it has to be. You already know this.
I'm still dreaming.
This is not a dream, Vincent Law. From the perspective of others, I am part of the world. But when I observe the world from my perspective, I am nowhere to be found. I do not belong to the world. That is the limit, the boundary between all and self. Incorrect. It is not I think, therefore I am. Correct. The answer is I think, therefore you are.
In truth, Proxy
You. It's all about you. It's what you are.
The proxy in Vincent's mind is pointing to something indescribable, inexpressible, unlimited, and a part of one's self. He's talking about the unconscious. After all, we're in the theater of his mind. Therefore, the proxy had to be some sort of part of his mind. The unconscious is a psychological term, and it refers to the part of the human mind which we can't perceive. The mysteries of the unconscious are bottomless. Thinking is one such mystery. Where do thoughts come from? We think that we do the thinking, but if you pay attention, then you can observe that thoughts arise without your conscious effort. What we know for certain is that we aren't consciously thinking up thoughts. If I were to say, think of a fruit, and you thought of an apple, did you think of an apple? Well, if you did, then did you think of an apple? Hopefully by now you can see that you can go like this forever. Obviously you didn't think of anything. The thought just popped up in your mind. You could come up with a story which would explain why you thought of an apple, but in truth, you don't really know. When the proxy said, incorrect, it is not I think, therefore I am. Correct, the answer is I think, therefore you are. He was pointing to the fact that the unconscious is the origin of thought, which affirms your existence. And he was also speaking from the person of the unconscious, because he's the personification of the unconscious. If you look at Ergo Proxy, then what you see is a pitch black shape covered with a mask. Isn't that the way you would make an inconceivable aspect of human mind flesh? Personification of an idea, or in this case an aspect of human mind, is a process in which somebody puts the characteristics of an abstract entity in flesh. It's an ancient method. Want to describe an ideal man? Instead of writing a list of qualities which nobody could remember, much less enact, you instead create a story in which this man embodies the ideal. And since we are monkeys see, monkey do sort of species, we can reach for that ideal easier than an abstract ideal. The same principle applies to the personification of the unconscious. You could write a list of facts we know about it, but that would make forming a general concept of what the unconscious is more difficult. On the other hand, a personified unconscious, such as a proxy, provides an image of the idea, and is easier for us to perceive, without mentioning the fact that personified ideas attract way more interest. How many people read psychology books on the unconscious, versus how many people watch anime on the same matter, albeit not knowing that it's what they're doing? In the 15th episode, there was a short reference to a psychologist, Carl Gustav Jung, where he was called the king of the subconscious.
Carl Gustav Jung was known as the author of Psychology and Alchemy. Jung was also known as the king of what?
The answer was king of the subconscious.
Jung himself preferred to use the word unconscious, and so will I. There isn't a grand difference between them, other than the subconscious is even more vaguely defined and sort of shaded in unnecessary modern-day mysticism. I'm fairly confident that it wasn't a random mention of the man, since large amount of his work was aimed at shedding light on the very parts of the human mind which this anime is trying to explore, namely the fact that your conscious self is a small part of the equation which makes up your mind. Often proxies are referred to as gods. That is only because God is a more mystical way of saying unconscious, as Jung wrote. Hence, I prefer the term the unconscious, knowing that I might as equally well speak of God if I wish to express myself in mythic language. The great advantage of the concept God lies in making possible a much better personification of it. Now, the answer from Proxy 1 which I showed at the beginning makes more sense. When he says that proxies are the agents of the creator, what that means in more banal language is that proxies are the personification of the unconscious. There are very few proxies that are explored in detail, but what's obvious is that proxies differ in their nature. Proxies aren't just personifications of the unconscious, they're personifications of certain parts of the unconscious. Ergo Proxy is a clear-cut case. He's the shadow. As Proxy 1 puts it,
You are Vincent Law, the empty man, the creator's shadow bound in body and soul.
the shadow, once again, is one of those terms from psychology which represents the part of ourselves which we don't want to see as me. Typically, people don't want to see themselves as capable of great violence. Vincent is no exception. He saw himself as a good citizen, or at least somebody trying to become one. Meanwhile, killing proxies and in turn destroying corresponding cities, what's left of them. Eventually, Vincent accepted Ergo Proxy as part of himself, but the funny thing about Ergo Proxy is that I don't think he's one of the original 300 proxies. 2 of 3 major proxies have pendants with a different number on it. Monad has one with 13 edged on it. Proxy 1 has one with 1 edged on it. But Ergo Proxy doesn't have one. That's the first clue. The second is that Proxy 1 appears in Vincent's dreams. And there was this one episode where Vincent had a dream in which Proxy 1 went into the room of memories and destroyed the autorave inside there. A short while later, Vincent went to the room of memories and the autorave was destroyed in the same manner. Either that was a very funny coincidence, or it wasn't a dream. Maybe it was Vincent blacking out and acting as Proxy 1 because he is the Proxy 1. Just think about it. Proxy 1 has been in the picture since the first episode, but he hasn't interacted with anyone except that one little annoying outlying case at the end where Riel was in the scene together with Vincent and Proxy 1. Who knows, maybe we got shown what Vincent saw in a dreamlike state, but what Riel saw might have been Vincent physically, but Proxy 1 at the steering wheel. Oh yeah, and there's also the fact that Proxy 1, when talking to Vincent, continually states that I am you and you are me.
Who am I? I told you, I am you and you are me.
Given all of this evidence, it seems quite probable that Proxy 1, Ergo Proxy and Vincent is the same person. The way I see the relationship between Vincent, Ergo Proxy and Proxy 1 is analogous to Jekyll and Hyde Inception style. As a reminder, in the movie Inception, you could get into people's dreams. Further still, you could get into a dream of a dream. Analogously, the waking state, the conscious personality, the base layer would be Vincent. Then you could go down into the unconscious state, the first level of a dream, the level of the Ergo Proxy, which represents Vincent's darker side. And further still, a dream within a dream level of depth, there is the level of Proxy 1, which has the memories Vincent suppressed. What we witnessed in Ergo Proxy was a story of a man who, after realizing the nature of his own existence, tried to live in a fantasy of his own creation. All fantasies eventually crumble, and so did Vincent's, which led him into a journey of discovering the parts he repressed. So what was the point of remembering that which you already knew? The journey was the point. Realizing too much too quickly can be devastating, and Vincent needed to take revelations bit by bit.
Bit by bit. Bit by bit. Bit by bit. Bit by bit. Bit by bit. Bit by bit. Bit by bit.